Greetings, salutations from space, and aloha from Earth friends. Gemini Brett here for Storytelling Hour. It is Wednesday, Miércoles, Mercury's Day at 11:11 a.m. Pacific time anyway, which means Storytelling Hour. And I'm happy to be here with you. Felt like a good topic to address this week would be essential dignity, and whether it is essential or dignified, or perhaps neither or both. What is essential dignity? The general idea is that planets are strengthened when there are moving through signs that they call home, or divisions of signs, or other divisions of signs, or other degrees of signs. And so let's be there. I want to just share a little bit of my own training in astrology, and I guess the history of my training, which is that I began my study with Daniel Gemario at the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, now the Turning of the Ages Mystery School. And I was there for some time and loved Daniel. He and I actually just recorded a course for the Turning of the Ages Mystery School, an astronomy cosmology course that I am in the midst of editing right now, and could use strength and power, especially with our baby girl coming along. Anyway, I also, however, pretty soon after my study began, ventured out and looked into many other traditions and many other paradigms, including traditional astrology like Hellenistic astrology, which I studied first with Gary Caton. I took Chris Brennan's wonderful Hellenistic astrology course. A couple of the few books in the sea of astrology text around here that I've actually finished are these wonderful texts by Demetra George, Ancient Astrology in Theory and Practice. I'm laughing because the cover of this thing shows some significant wear. And so astrology, old and new. And why I wanted to mention that is in the Turning of the Ages Mystery School, and what was once the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, or we can say Daniel's Shamanic Astrology Paradigm, they don't do the rulership thing. Okay, so I imagine everyone listening here, like Shell, hey Shell, and Emmy, hi Emmy, and Leah, and QZ, and Roslyn, and Nadine, and Lillian. Thank you so much for being here for Storytelling Hour. And I see Malvina and Soulwise, and the whole universe is here, which is amazing. And on we go. It's really a joy to have you present. The presence of your presence is the greatest gift. Stephen the Jupiterian, Mani, what's up? Thanks for being here live, and would love to hear any comments you have or input along the way. Azima, nice to see you here as well. And hey, Sharon. All right. So, yeah, this idea of sign rulership, right? Like, I think you know the trip that Mars is said to rule the sign of Aries, and Venus the sign of Taurus, and Mercury, Gemini, and the moon, Cancer, and that, right? I want to show you, I guess, an image of the so-called domiciles, to use an older term that I personally prefer. And speaking of old, I prefer the old map as well. Let me just show you some slides from one of the classes that I created for the golden year of Earth astrology, one of the fundamentals classes, as I call them. So let's do this, and then do this. Home of the Time Lords. So the general idea is the sun is said to rule Leo, right? Um, and many will teach this as a result of Leo being the hottest month of the year. Now, tell that to somebody who resides in Melbourne, Australia, or Bolivia, right? Or any other place that is south of Earth's equator, where sun moving through the sign of Leo means the middle of winter, not the middle of summer, right? Is this planet sign relationship based upon Northern Hemisphere's seasonal experience? Should it be? An interesting question. Regardless, Leo is said to be the sun's home, and Cancer next door is said to be the house of the moon. And then we branch out like this, at least according to the modern approach. And Isabel always barks when she sees Uranus and Neptune on charts like this. So the astrological alphabet takes this even further, right? Where they say Aries is ruled by Mars, and therefore Mars is the natural ruler of the first house. And this is known as the astrological alphabet, which is really kind of popularized in the 1970s by humanistic and psychological modern astrologers like Zip Dobbins and many, many others. I'm going to let Deb Holding do the talking for me here, as I often do. So let me just read from this wonderful book by Deborah Holding called The Houses, Temples of the Sky, where she writes, although modern natal astrology allows a considerable exchange of meaning between houses and signs, the suggestion that houses derive their meanings from signs is clearly contradicted in traditional texts, where a much stronger distinction is readily apparent. At best, this theory is an oversimplification. At worst, it blurs the edges of two quite separate astrological tools, resulting in slack symbolism, so vague as to be of little practical use. I just want to say there, I have seen like this logical alphabet be used effectively and practically. I think maybe this might be a bit harsh, but I will suggest that even looking at this idea that the sun is the so-called natural ruler of the fifth house, and I think you know how that works. The idea is Leo is the fifth sign, and the sun rules Leo, and therefore the sun rules the fifth house. Well, this is a very clear indication of how far from nature modern astrology has fallen. Because the question is, why in the heavens, sorry, why in the hell would the sun want nighttime? All right. On average, like clock time, because I know how that's how our consciousness tends to be configured when it comes to time. The sun moves to the fifth between like 8 and 10 p.m. Like, and that, by the way, that's average. It's really the third and the fourth hours of night, right? It is no doubt dark outside when the sun is moving through the fifth. So why would the sun want nighttime? Pardon me for saying this, but it's ridiculous. Now, traditionally, let's bring the sun, let's let the earth spin, and therefore the sky spin, and we'll bring the sun to the rise in the east, and then to its reach at the midheaven at midday. And here, the sun in the ninth is where traditionally the sun is said to rejoice. So while planets are said to use the modern term, and I'm going to retrograde back to why I'm not a big fan of it, the sun or planets are said to rule signs, but rejoice in houses, the sun in the ninth, the moon in the third, Venus in the fifth, and Jupiter in the 11th, Mars in the sixth, and Saturn in the 12th, Mercury in the first. And this brings us into planetary sect. And other conditions of so-called accidental dignity. Sect, in a sense, goes both ways, accidental and essential, and I'm taking us further than we want to go into those realms right now. I want to kind of move from there and get to the thema mundi, which is said to be the chart offered to us by Hermes with 15 degrees Cancer rising, not that Aries rising chart that modern astrology students are most familiar with. Cancer rising, and specifically 15 degrees Cancer rising. And this is said to be like the first map that was offered to the star student, where we were shown planet sign correspondence. And it looked like this. Only half of the signs were filled. And so interestingly, we get planets all at 15 degrees of their signs. And by the way, astronomically, unless things were a lot different back then, and they weren't, it's impossible for Venus to be at 15 Libra with the sun at 15 Leo. Venus can never be more than 48 degrees from the sun, and 15 Libra is 60 degrees from 15 Leo. It is impossible for Mercury to be at 15 Virgo when the sun is at 15 Leo. Mercury can only ever be 28 degrees from the sun, maximum. It doesn't do that in every cycle at all. I was born with Mercury at maximum elongation, like within an hour, and my Mercury is only 18 degrees from the sun at the time of my birth. So already there's something here which is speaking perhaps less astronomically than code. Different Hellenistic or other traditional astrologers have different like expressions for how the other signs were filled. And some say it was like as the moon traveled around the zodiac and came back, then these signs were filled from the farthest, slowest, or the furthest regions, like indicated by the slowest moving planet, that's Saturn, to the closest regions or the closest sphere, indicated by the fastest moving, who is the moon. How much do we want to play this game? I mean, I go from here in this particular class, by the way, to just show aspect theory and why traditionally, for example, the sextile is associated with Venus and the square with Mars and the trine with Jupiter, and on we can go there. And I think it's further than I want to be right now, but I will just show this code. Let me start. Yeah, okay, let's go here. So sun in Leo, moon in Cancer, and then in the tradition, we bridge or kind of arc out from each of the luminaries according to planetary speed. So maybe this is even easier to see on the moon side, because moon is the one who circles the zodiac most quickly, doing so in 27 1/3 days, which is why the zodiacal order, that movement west to east through the sky, was once called moonwise, versus the sunwise motion, which is east to west, the motion through the houses. So from moon, we go to the next quickest, who is Mercury, then Venus, then Mars. I'm just showing here astronomically, well, what about the Earth? And the key, by the way, is that the Earth is at the center of the chart. So we kind of have this like solar half and this lunar half. And next to the luminaries, the sun and the moon, we branch out according to planetary speed. And I really love this map, where each of the planets has a diurnal and a nocturnal sign. Those are the terms, by the way, that I personally prefer to terms like yin and yang, or feminine and masculine, or negative and positive, or different polarizing terms that have been used for the polarities, because I'm a sky guy, I'm an astronomer, right? And so I like diurnal, day-like, and nocturnal, night-like. And as you know, the earth and the water signs, which go down and in, they fall. They're associated with the night, nocturnal, where the air and the fire signs, up and out, rising, with the day, diurnal. So we get Mercury, for example, in the nocturnal Virgo, the diurnal Gemini, Venus in the nocturnal Taurus, the diurnal Libra, Mars in the nocturnal Scorpio, and the diurnal Aries. So what happens when you take Scorpio away from Mars and give it to Pluto? Like you take Mars's nocturnal side. All right. Jupiter in the nocturnal Pisces and diurnal Sagittarius, Saturn in the nocturnal Capricorn and diurnal Aquarius. Yes. Now, if we put the planets in the opposite side of the scene, we see the detriments, as they're called, really by modern astrologers. I find it to be the most detrimental term in astrology. We're going to look at some examples today of folks born with planets in their so-called detriments that certainly do not express a weakened version of that planet's significations, as I find often to be taught. I can't help but recall this experience I had once in an astrological meetup here in the Bay, and a teacher was in town helping people connect to their planets, and we were all looking into the Mars sign in our natal chart, so the sign which hosted the travel of Mars at the time of our births, right? And somebody there was expressing how much he really loved that he had Mars in Taurus and how great of an experience it's been for him. Well, as you can see in this map, Taurus, some say, is a detrimental sign for Mars. And so there was a traditional astrologer there that was like, no, Taurus isn't good for Mars. That's like a weak place for Mars. And, it's a danger in astrology. And I'm sure I commit this a lot more than I'm aware of, to commit the crime of telling somebody, what they are based upon their chart instead of listening to them. And then learning some astrology by reflecting upon this person's experience and what we see in the chart, right? Telling them that they're just unaware and no, that can't be good, that's bad. Like, that's detrimental astrology. And we need to be careful, and hence the topic of this jam, which is essential dignity, which, by the way, is sign-based dignity versus like house-based dignity, like planetary rejoicing or other accidental dignities, as they were called, like a planet's phase, whether direct or retrograde, whether visible or under the beams of the sun, more on and on we can go. Okay, so essential dignity is true for the entire world. And so it's things like so-called rulership, exaltation, and other things that we'll also find our way to today. Um, And the question is essential dignity essential to astrology? And also, is it dignified? Are terms like the detriments detrimental to astrology and rather undignified? I will say that I quite prefer the term that some medieval astrologers used, which was to say that when a planet is far from its home on the opposite side of the world, that it's a planet in exile. I think that that term is typically more in concert with somebody's experience when they have planets in these signs. Than detriment is. And I find it can be actually quite productive as a counselor using this wonderful craft of astrology to see if these exiled planets at the time of a native's becoming has created an experience in their life where they too feel exiled. Now that's pretty low-hanging fruit for somebody who's coming for an astrology reading, not meaning that people who come for readings are in a state of challenge, but that they're interested in astrology, which, though it's growing in popularity once again, is rather fringe and different. And I know that one of the most common things I experience with clients of all shapes and sizes and from all walks and ways is I feel all alone because I'm the only one I know into this weird stuff. Right. And I'm very much shunned and all that. Um, but let's look at some example charts and dream into this idea of dignity and stability. Again, is it dignified? So I'm going to retrograde back to this tale I was telling about my astrological education. I came to astrology when I was probably like pretty late in the game. I was 37, just after my 37th solar return in 2012, which many of you will know that means I was in a nodal return window, Saturn square Saturn. For my generation, I'm born in 1975. That also means Pluto square Pluto transit was happening at the time. There was so much more for me personally. The Aries Uranus at the time was squaring my Cancer Mars. Oh, that's right. I have Mars in fall. Venus too. And Saturn in detriment. How have I even survived this long? Actually, the first time I received a traditional astrology reading, given all of those things, the astrologer asked, "Hey, what would you like to look at?" I was like, "I just want to know why I'm not dead." Like with all this stuff. Anyway, we're gonna get back there. So at the shamanic astrology paradigm, just like Daniel has cast aside a lot of the patriarchal languaging, like rulership, um, or superior, which is a term that comes up in astronomy for planets conjunct but behind the sun. It just means above, actually, in the etymology of it all. But exterior seems to do a better job actually describing what's going on anyway, and it doesn't carry that like charge, right? Well, then, my question, having studied other paradigms and approaches to astrology, is, well, are we throwing like, the proverbial baby out with the bathwater in some ways there? And that almost to the very beginning of this tradition, we have this idea of essential dignity. Now, another piece in me that has wondered whether this is something we really should use, like whether or not it is essential to doing astrology, is where is the astronomy in it? Right? So when I look at signs themselves, and I don't know if y'all know about my religion, but I know that they emanate from a crystal core of Earth, which looks like this, the hexagonal crystal, which has 6 sides and 6 points, and therefore 12 signs. And it's aligned to Earth's rotational axis, and the Earth spins about it, which is why right now, a different sign is rising here than another place on the Earth, where you are in Germany or you are in England, maybe San Francisco, but maybe the Canary Islands in the house. I'm not sure. We have folks from all around the globe, and I'm really, again, honored by the present that you offer with your presence here. Thank you. And thank you for your contributions. I'm seeing you in the chat. Feel free to give the video a like while you're here. Wouldn't that warm my heart? But what in my chart needs likes? Okay, anyway. Let's move forward. So planets in signs may or may not be an astronomical thing. There is, of course, much debate about whether the tropical signs, the signs of the tropical zodiac, which is a zodiac I prefer, have anything to do with astronomy, because the signs do not align to the constellations. So, for example, I was up this morning looking at Mars, who is currently said to be at home in Aries. And I was looking at Mars right in between the tie of the two fishes. So why isn't this Mars in Pisces? And other zodiacs, like sidereal zodiacs, or constellational zodiacs, which some of these Ophiuchian folks are pushing for, would say Mars was in Pisces then. So aren't the tropical signs not astronomical? They are. They are the Earth-astronomical. They are all about Earth's spine, the sword of our stone, the world tree, our rotational axis. And I believe something beneath our feet that looks like this. Because a good question is, why are there 12 signs anyway? But without taking too much time in that world, let me just say you can never have equal signs like 30-degree slices of the path of the sun, the ecliptic, map to the zodiac constellations, because the constellations that embrace the ecliptic plane vary significantly in size. Right? The mighty ram is like 15 degrees, like literally half a sign's worth of sky, where the demure priestess is 47 degrees, more than a sign and a half's worth of the heavens, right? And this is where you get into these weird 13th sign of Ophiuchus things that are very modern, and people want to say it's like the unforgotten ancient thing, and it's just like, no, 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 we have a lot of the ancient stuff. But the ancients were speaking in some regards to constellational versus tropical, like all the way back to the Hellenistic times. Let me actually read to you. I gotta find it on the computer here. From the Hellenistic astronomer Geminos, who I learned about not too long ago. It's trippy to me. Geminos was an astrologer, we believe, from some time within like 100 BC to 100 AD. So basically the Hellenistic era. And he was really kind of giving astronomers of the day a hard time for being disconnected from the astronomy of the living sky. And I'm like, weird. That's kind of, I try not to be harsh about it, but that's kind of my rap. And I stole the same name as this guy. So that's strange. The other thing is I was born in 1975. And Geminos was was first translated into a so-called modern language in 1975. And doesn't stop there. I'm just going to keep babbling as I try. Okay, here. Geminos' text, which we believe was titled An Introduction to the Phenomena, which I just love. And it's a text from the Hellenistic era, right? So we're talking like Alexandria, Egypt, right? Around, the time that the BC became AD. So Introduction to the Phenomena, a translation and study of Hellenistic survey of astronomy. So he was, by the way, first translated into the English language, which is the only one I can read, embarrassingly, in 2005 at the University of Washington, which is the year I graduated from that university. I had no idea about any of this stuff, by the way. I wasn't interested in astrology at the time. I was like in engineering school. So enough of my ego stuff or like past life tripping behind. Let me just read to you from Geminos here. So he says, on signs and constellations, the word sign is used in two ways. According to one way, it is a 12th part of the zodiac circle. That is a certain interval of space demarcated by stars or points. According to the other, it is an image formed from the stars. The 12 parts are equal in size, but the constellation signs are not equal in size, nor are they formed from equal numbers of stars, nor do they all exactly fill the spaces assigned to the 12 parts. In other words, this is an ancient problem. It's not something new, like NASA or Cosmo might have you believe. The other thing that's, I think, very interesting about that passage from Geminos is that he says this thing that the 12 parts are a certain interval of space, that would be 30 degrees of space, demarcated by stars or points. Okay, and I think he's actually there talking to us about two different 12-part zodiacs. One of those, and you know, I just had an image up that I guess I can share with you here. One of those would be the tropical zodiac. That would be signs aligned to points. Another would be sidereal zodiac. That would be signs aligned. Oops, let me get that thing back up here. So we get a little pointer thing happening too. Oh, golly. Let's try all that again. Where did that thing go? Sorry. Fascinating. Okay, here you are. All right, let me get that back up on your screen. Right. Okay, so this design is actually based upon a design from the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, which was the logo of the school. It's been modified. I see some of you here have studied in that world also. You'll probably be familiar with an image that has galactic center here. Well, Earth and her cardinal directions are at the center of geocentric or centered astrology. And these glyphs, by the way, indicate the tropical signs, which, like so many systems of ancient wisdom traditions, are directionally aligned. I would say they are directionally defined. And it's Earth's North Pole, which points to, and I would say this is what Geminos is speaking about with points, to this cusp here. The cardinal direction north, the cardinal cusp Cancer. The cardinal direction south, which is Earth's south pole, leans in every moment towards cardinal Capricorn. Cardinal Aries is east, and that's why it works like a global ascendant. And that's why the so-called natural zodiac, with Aries as the first, actually has an astronomical foundation, which is based upon the truth that this cusp here, not of a constellational zodiac or a sidereal zodiac, but of the tropical zodiac, the Pisces Aries cusp, or cardinal Aries, begins at cardinal east, the direction east from the center of the earth, and cardinal west, the Libra glyph here, which looks like the setting sun, because cardinal Libra is aligned to cardinal west, and the setting sun is the ultimate image of the west. Now, this was a time, so here on the outside in purple, sidereal, meaning of the stars. Now, the problem there is you take a star to define a cusp, and then you divide the ecliptic into 30-degree slices from there, which don't map the constellations. In fact, the most popular sidereal zodiacs align 0 Libra to this star, Spica, or in India called Chitra, which is actually the astronomers call Alpha Virgo. Right? Now, it's even more confusing now. Let me show you kind of an updated image. I don't even know if I do that here, by the way, because what I was, this will work, 2012. So this is kind of like our day and age, where Spica, or Spica, or Chitra, the shaft of wheat that the priestess of the heavens holds, the star the astronomers called Alpha Virgo, is at like 0 Libra of many popular sidereal zodiacs, which would then have 12 parts aligned to a star, versus 12 parts aligned to a point like that which Earth's North Pole points to, and that's 0 tropical Cancer, again indicated here by the sign glyphs we use today, because they're all images of tropical astronomy. For example, the Sagittarius glyph is just the tilted Earth, whose equator is tilted from the ecliptic plane. This is the rotational axis of Earth and the equator. I could go on and on like that. Right. Anyway, in our day and age, Spica, or Chitra, lives at 24 tropical Libra, right? And so this is because of the Earth's third motion of precession. So I'm taking too much time there, but it's always good to show, especially because so many of us who are practicing with the tropical zodiac are just completely blasted by, frankly, ignorant statements like there's no astronomical basis to the tropical zodiac, which is completely astronomical. It's all about Earth's rotational axis. In fact, it's the only zodiac that's not arbitrary because, for example, the Pisces Aries cusp of the tropical zodiac is again due east of the center of the Earth where we all connect. It's easier to just show it this way. Let me get a globe over here. Well, let's get the armillaries here. The North Pole of Earth leans towards tropical Cancer, which is why when the sun is there, it's above Earth's Tropic of Cancer. And I can rant about that forever. I always take too long with it because I really feel for the many astrologers who have to deal with modern rationalist astronomer hate, who themselves are basically like abandoning terrestrial astronomical knowledge so that they can stay armed in their like battle against astrology. You know, it'd be fun. Let's look at a couple like astrology haters charts and see if they have a dignified or a debilitated Mars. Okay, what would you guess? Well, let's just say like Neil deGrasse Tyson. If we felt that like his attack of astrology, for example, is indicated in any way by Mars, would you feel that that would be indicated by a strong Mars or a weak Mars? Um, we're just gonna have to put one of you all on timeout, right? Because what are you talking about? Great. So here we see from Sheila, Tyson has totally hurt my feelings. And Neil was my first pick. Yeah, I mean, like he's kind of a voice that comes to mind these days. You know, like Bill Nye, the science guy, would be one as well. I actually wanted to do a talk at one point on like the astrology of astrological haters, of astrology haters, because I think first of all, it would be an interesting investigation. But secondly, I think because it would kind of tick them off, wouldn't it? Not that they would ever hear about it. Because they basically stop at, look, the signs don't align to the constellations, therefore it's all fake. Just this straw man argument. And sadly, they don't understand just the very real astronomy of signs. Okay, so all of that was just because I wanted to tell you this. Signs are astronomical. They are living on the Earth, experiencing the planets moving through their own orbital paths and the way that we project them down to the path of the sun or the plane of the Earth orbit of the sun, which is the ecliptic, the plane of the year, right? And that's the heart of the zodiac. And the 12th equal divisions, the signs, whether you're looking at star-based zodiacs, I would say even more so, and this is completely contrary to like I would probably what every astrologer would say these days. The tropical signs are the most astronomical. They're at least the most Earth astronomical. And you know, my school is called the School of Earth Astrology, right? Okay. And though my community at the school is called Constellations, and I love constellations and I love stars, let me even just say this: while stars are celestial, constellations are terrestrial. Dig that. Okay. Houses also absolutely astronomical. Right? The ground beneath our feet. And as the sky spins due to the earth spinning, right? Sun, moon, the planets, the stars of the zodiacal constellations all rise and they reach and they rest and they root and they move every day through the 12 houses. which are a description of your local experience of the sky, right? Let me just say this thing because it will kind of be important to some languaging as we explore essential dignity and whether or not it's essential and or dignified. Is that what we these days call the signs? The traditional, or at least the ancient astrologers called houses. So they actually use those terms to describe what we call signs. It does not mean in any way that they were conflating houses and signs. They didn't call what we call houses at all. They called them places, topos, which also relates to etymologically topics, interestingly, right? So I'm going to retrograde back to that because it's kind of important here. Okay. Aspects. So signs are astronomical. Houses, astronomical. Aspects, okay, like I just watched a half moon set. What that you get that weird straight line in the face of the moon, right? And if she's not quite there yet, the waning half moon will be tomorrow. And I did notice that she still had a little bit of curve, right? But the moon is such a curvy being, and nature is curvy, or as Ellen Watts would say, is wiggly, right? So it's so weird to see a straight line in the face of the moon, which of course happens twice a month when the moon is 90 degrees from the sun or square the sun waxing, and then also waning, right? The shape of the moon's smile will show you how far she is from the sun by phase, angle, by degree. Yeah, I mean, aspects, these kind of geometrical arrangements of planets and their relationships to one another in that regard, they're very astronomical. Now, importantly, like when I look at a moon exactly 90 degrees from the sun, unless she's at her node, one of her nodes, the south or the north node, the moon is not on the sun's circle. And then that 90 degrees isn't actually 90 degrees. These get more interesting with planets like Pluto, especially Pluto in like the late 70s and 80s. But when we look at planets in a chart wheel, we're projecting them down to, as I call it, the one ring that rules them all, and in the light binds them, the ring of the sun, which I call the circle of spirit, the ecliptic, because it's where the sun lives, right? All planets have their own orbital paths. And so when you're looking at like when I was speaking earlier about my Pluto square Pluto, I was in that along with many other life cycle initiations when I found astrology. Pluto then in Capricorn, where, by the way, because Pluto's south node resides in that tropical sign, Pluto was very close to the sun's path. When I was born, Pluto was in Libra, which is where Pluto gets furthest away, at least furthest north of the ecliptic. So that 90 degrees of Pluto in Capricorn to where Pluto was at the time of my birth in Libra wasn't really 90 degrees. It was like taking a thing here and here and projecting them to the same plane, like it's kind of like the shadows of them, and seeing that they form a square angle between the two of them. Astrologers, and I should say astronomers because there haven't been too many, but like Charles Jane, John Rowe, for example, they kind of argued for in mundo aspects where we'd also consider a planet's latitude, and then you have to get all Pythagorean or even trickier into spherical trigonometry. And I know you're not trying to go there right now. The point I want to make is this: for a sky guy who appreciates, by the way, starting with moon, who I see every night and day, clouds allowing. I should say night or day, sometimes both, clouds allowing. I like to start there, and with moon and sun, and then Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, rather than with Pluto, who I will never see with my eyeballs, or with the lunar nodes, where there's just no body that's actually there. Now, by the way, I can see the nodes. And that's a different tale. That's not some kind of shamanic superpower, by the way. That's astronomical experience. But regardless, I'm a sky guy. Like, I start with what is visible. And one thing that really attracts me to not only the Shamanic Astrology Mystery Schools approach, or the Turning of the Ages Mystery Schools approach, which has a very, I mean, it basically stresses a living sky knowledge as imperative. But why I love traditional astrology, because when you read terms like under the beams of the sun or combust or whatever, like, this is actually a thing that we experience. Like, I right now on May 29th, 2024, dearly miss Venus. Venus has been gone for more than a month. Like, I used to see Venus as a morning star every time I had the will to wake up before the light and go have a look. Right now, Venus is literally behind the sun. Let me show you this in a very different view. And this is why the direct Venus-Sun conjunction was called superior, and why, again, exterior is kind of a better term. But if we look from Earth, which is where we are looking from, Venus is behind the sun, or we can say above the sun, you see? So Venus is under the beam. She's combust. And by the way, Venus will conjoin Sun on the 4th of June. And that's a Tuesday next. And that is why I'll go see the Mariners defeat the Oakland A's that night. Oh, wait, no. That's why on Wednesday next, the topic of Starry Telling Hour here, starting at 11:11 a.m. Pacific, as it is every Wednesday, will be the Venus Cazimi, the Venus-Sun conjunction. What does it mean as Venus is going through this trial by fire? It's a very different look than the idea that you just add Venus to Sun and it's love and light, right? I miss Venus. So all of this to just say, I'm very interested in the truth that astrology is so much more than some symbolic language alone. Astrology is the poetic breath of nature. And when we re-nature our astrology by reconnecting to the living sky, we remember the roots of the rules and the proofs of the astrological equations we use, because we don't want to be just doing math and adding a bunch of things up. Venus plus Aries equals Shira. I've said that as a joke 1,000 times, but by the way, then I studied some Shira and I realized it's totally true. Anyway, you can tell I've said that many times. I used to say astrology is not some symbolic language. It is. Now I say it is not a symbolic language alone, because I realize that much of what I do in astrology is based upon some strange symbolic code. And when I came into this idea of dispositorship, to use a term that I much personally greatly prefer to a term like rulership, because I do feel that that has some patriarchal baggage, and you can tell that my dog Isabel does not like it either. I see that dispositorship really works, and I see that essential dignities and debilities, also terms that I do not enjoy, work too. But I don't think that they work the way that many say that they should. All right, let's take a breath, drink a cup of tea. Let's give some love to Jade Frog. I'm not sponsored, by the way, or maybe I am. Kirsten sent me a bunch of amazing tea. Like right now, I'm drinking this White Lotus Woods 90s show puer. Right? Like, Kirsten, thank you so much. He sent me some brilliant teas. That stuff is not cheap. And if you know about Gong Fu, which is you're pouring with 2 pots, right? If you don't, reach out to Kirsten and he will teach you. And you want to drink some really wonderful teas, Jade Frog, y'all. Kirsten has been through hell in recent years. I'm actually hoping I can get him to come here onto the pod at some point to share some tale and share some love. He's a very lovely being. And to fund the next phase of his life, he is currently put some of his like tea library up for sale. So if you like me enjoy, if you like I enjoy amazing teas from back in the day when they were cultivated perhaps more traditionally and with less nasties involved, check out Jade Frog Tea, which you can now find online, and tell Kirsten hi from me. Okay. And tell him to come on to Storytelling Hour sometime. We'll get him on. Brilliant, man. Okay. So what is up with essential dignities? Like Mars is in Aries now. Does that make Mars strong? The sun is in Gemini right now. Does that have something to do with Mercury? Where is the astronomy of that? I mean, I showed you this kind of the sun lives in Leo and the moon's the neighbor in Cancer. Maybe that's the other way around. The original zodiacs, by the way, were not solar. You can never see the stars that the sun is aligned to. You will go blind trying. They were lunar. So maybe we should start with the moon in Cancer. Now that's interesting because Cancer is the place, at least in the Northern Hemisphere experience, where the moon is highest in the heavens. Just like the sun is at summer solstice. In the Southern Hemisphere experience, by the way, the Cancer moon is the one that's most grounded. Beautiful. Maybe even more water in Cancer. Regardless, and globally, this Earth's north axis leans in every moment to 0 tropical Cancer. And so while the seasonal realities or experiences, I should say, of, let's say, the sun moving through tropical signs is completely local. It's not even hemispheric. I mean, the seasonal experience in London is completely different than that in Hawaii, or even here in California where I reside, right? And you can live on an island at the same terrestrial latitude as some place that's in the middle of a continent, and you're having a very different experience of the seasons, right? So the tropical zodiac is definitely not constellational. It's not seasonal. Like so many sacred systems of ancient wisdom traditions, the signs of the tropical zodiac are directionally aligned. And I would actually suggest that they are directionally defined. North is north everywhere on Earth, that way to Santa's place. Right? And that's just the cusp of Cancer. All right. So anyway, signs, to use the current term, houses, aspects, astronomical. Well, what about dispositorship? We can't say it's astronomical, the sun rules Leo because it's the hottest month. If we did, we would have to say that the sun is dignified in Aquarius for folks in Peru. Dig that. Right? Is there something just about the north direction? That's the Gemini Cancer cusp, which is so Mercury moon. It feels to be more alive in this symbol code, or it maybe describes a part of nature that I don't have eyes to see, and maybe the human being does not. Maybe. When we take it further into the realms of essential dignity, and we should. Okay, like this is a really healing thing for me when I first had a session with Gary Caton, where I was like, yeah, man, what's up with Venus and Virgo? Right? Like that, Venus was in Virgo when I was born. And I had already tuned into that Venus was near maximum elongation when I was born. I was interested in that. I didn't know this term accidental dignity to describe that phase of Venus, by the way, and didn't know that some of the ancients said that this was a time when Venus would saturate the chart. And so that was interesting, especially for a musician to hear. Speaking of musicians, hey Zoe, and hey Selena, and hey Estella, magicians. Really cool to see some names of dear friends and amazing beings here. And just to retrograde back, because I'm seeing this from Claudia, I'd say a debilitated Mars that has to prove itself, right? So that's back in that comment or question that we asked before, like astrology haters like Neil deGrasse Tyson, who seem to have a lot of Mars. Does that mean Mars is strong or weak, right? Actually, let me just find his chart and let's go there, and then we'll circle back or ellipse forward or whatever it is. Why don't I just share this with you? Hopefully you know about this amazing place online called AstroSeek. A breath within a breath within a breath within a breath within a. Okay. Astroseek.com. Famouspeople.astro-seek.com will get you here, where we can type Neil. I can't spell deGrasse. Uh-oh. Maybe we don't have his chart. Let's just do this. Because a nice thing also about you know what? I probably have him in my software. Hold on a second. Let's put that away. So, pro tip, by the way, when you're going to look up charts in your data bank, don't share your screen, because you will share the birth info of loved ones and clients and such. Let me see if I have his chart in here. No, every time I look, then I purge it, so my machine will feel clear. All right, so then I'm just going to type in a new chart here. So October 5th, 58. Please bear with me a moment, folks. In New York City, and I don't think we know time. Actually, I'm just going to go look at astro.com quickly too. See if there's a chart there. So we can type Neil deGrasse Tyson Astro Data Bank into the browser realm, and it looks like there's no chart at astro.com either, which really surprises me. It might be because they're trying to keep the energy clear, or maybe he's asked to not be examined astrologically. All the more reason. Okay, so let's just go over here real quick. I shouldn't be mean. So I just put in 12 p.m. so we can get the median positions right on this day. And let me go to a 0 Aries wheel. And I encourage you not to look at this as if we know anything about the houses, as we use that term today for Neil deGrasse Tyson, because we don't know what time he was born. Now, he was born Mercury Cazimi. And that should not be a shocker, even though this is Mercury as far behind the sun as possible. In the Hellenistic tradition, when Mercury is within a degree of the sun, and let's go back and forward 12 hours so we can see all hours of this calendar day, October 5th, 58, when Neil deGrasse Tyson was born. Mercury was within 16 arc minutes of the sun at 12 a.m. that day, and was 30 degrees, 30 arc minutes, half a degree to the either side of the sun at 12 a.m. the following day, right? So this whole day, Mercury is within a degree of the sun, which was the Hellenistic criterion for a planet Cazimi. I'll be speaking about that some next week on Storytelling Hour when we look at the coming or current Venus Cazimi. The medieval tradition used a stricter criterion of only 17 arc minutes, which at noon we certainly see. This is only 6 arc minutes away. My argument, by the way, is that I don't think, well, I know the medieval astrologers didn't have ephemerides or planetary tables that would allow for that type of resolution anyway, especially with Mercury. But regardless, this is a dignity for Mercury that Neil deGrasse Tyson has. And it's not surprising to consider that he would have a strong Mercury, right? He's like a genius dude. So we see Mars neither in Aries or Scorpio, which are said to be the traditional homes of Mars, the domiciles of Mars, nor in the signs across the way, Taurus or Libra, where Mars is said to be exiled. We don't see Mars in Capricorn, where Mars is said to be exalted, specifically at the 28th degree, or opposite the way when Mars is said to be in fall. We shouldn't necessarily stop there with our look at Mars. There's an interesting thing here of Mars in Mercury sign and Mercury in the sign of Venus, which dignifies Mercury, but might not help in this trine that they have, at least by plates. I might say more interestingly by degrees. They're not 90 or 120, but they're 130 degrees away. And I don't know that I want to get into a harmonic approach here, but I do just want to share that there's also divisions of the zodiac where we find, for example, Mercury in his own bounds, Mars in the bounds of Mercury, Mars also in the sign of Mercury, and then Mars in the face of Jupiter. So in this one place where I posed a question, would an astrology hater have so-called strong or weak Mars? And you saw maybe my little quote fingers up there. Maybe you're washing the dishes or just listening to this. I have my air quotes up when I said strong or weak. I think those are weak terms and don't offer strong astrology. And we'll go have a look. Maybe we'll take a look at some other astrology hater charts today, or let's just do that as like a dedicated theme for one of these storytelling hours one of these weeks. Okay. I want to just take another peek at a thing. Okay, cool. So let me show you this. Da, 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 da. Neil deGrasse Tyson has, well, actually, you know what? We don't know. I was going to say, referencing this, that the moon and Mars were parallel when he was born. But look, if I go 12 hours before, actually that held. Let's go 12 hours after. Now moon is parallel Uranus. So we really don't know, because moon moves so quickly, about lunar parallels if we don't have a birth time, and we should be careful there. Okay, like I really don't know. Even if moon, let's see, is she fast or slow? She's slow, and I can see it because she's close to Lilith. So that means moon would have been in Cancer for this entire day that Wikipedia tells me Neil deGrasse Tyson was born. But I don't know if moon and Mars were parallel. I did want to offer that, though, because I will be teaching parallels this weekend at Constellations. And I don't want to get so sidetracked there right now, but let me just tell you that Constellations, and I'll put a link in chat. I know many of you here are already have already aligned your star with ours, but Constellations is the membership community at the School of Earth Astrology, which is amazing. And I teach a class once a month. This month, I'll be teaching declination, kind of 101, well, 101 to 205. It's like declination, Antiscia, or Antiskia, to pronounce it more Greek. parallels, and even we'll speak a bit about parallels in synastry. And that's at 9 a.m. this Saturn's Day. I teach in the group the first Saturday of every calendar month, which is funny because I try to resist the Gregorian trip, but there you go. Amala Hall, with great gratitude from me and the rest of our crew, is teaching in astro herbalism class every month on third Wednesdays. And Amala will be teaching a Gemini herbs and Mercury herbs class coming up. She had her first class last month of Taurus Venus plants, and I still got to get some violet. And Alyssa Luna has been teaching astro embodiment through the signs once a month. Just taught her Gemini class. And this month we'll actually launch the Astro Tarot Circle here at the School of Astrology's constellations as well. All these other things are just community discussion groups where you can connect with friends of like heart and mind, sometimes of our differences, which comes alive, but doing it so in a nice way to kind of explore this starry study together and not feel like you're exiled or all alone. Ideally, we'd like to do that in the same room. I actually got to spend some time with a fellow constellations member outside under the stars last night, which is the best classroom. But maybe next best thing to be able to connect online like this and share. So actually the class that I'll be teaching this Saturday, I'll transmit for like 90 minutes. We'll take a break and then we'll all teach the second half of the class together and look at chart examples of people who are actually there and who can feed back on what we're seeing or suggesting or believing we might see, right? And specifically this weekend, this Saturday's class, 9 a.m. Pacific, for those of you who are in constellations, I'll be teaching declination, Antisha, parallels, and even synastry in parallel. All right. The other dimension of astrology, some have called it powerful stuff, good stuff to know, and so beautifully astronomical, and actually brings us back. So I'll start this Saturday with a tradition even before zodiacal traditions of, is that shit high or in the middle or low? All right. If you would like to join Constellations, and Diane, thanks for that testimonial there in the YouTube chat. We are still offering entry at the maiden voyage price of only $16 a month. You can quit anytime, come in, take the class, and bail if you want. But if you come in now, there will be many, 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 many hours of astrology classes I've taught: astrology, astronomy, astro herbalism, astro embodiment, and opportunities connect like many times a week. So that's as much as I'll say about that for now. Okay, let me go to two things. First, let's just get down with the language. Is essential dignity dignified? Is it essential? Now, to some astrological paradigms, not at all. As I mentioned before, like where I got my start, in the shamanic astrology paradigm, they just don't do it. Though they will teach Venus over here and Libra over here, and you're like, those things smell a lot alike, And Daniel does honor, right, that there's a history of that planet and that sign being connected. But he's not doing something like, okay, well, the sun is now in Gemini, as is Venus. Where is Mercury? Because that has something to do with their condition in the sign. And the condition of Mercury has something to do with them in the sign. Now, many of us have found that works. Rhonda, I'm just seeing you asked what time Saturday. The time is 9 a.m. Pacific, which is something ridiculous in Australia. Yeah, so sorry about that. But of course, it will be recorded for you to see. And Rhonda also, who teaches Astro Gold software, complimenting me on the wheel style I created to show both the terms or bounds and the faces. All right, we want to go there today. And that has me retrograding actually back to when I asked Gary about Venus in Virgo. because I have Venus in Virgo, and some say that's Venus in fall. That's detrimental. I have Mars in Cancer, or Mars, I should say, was in Cancer when I was born, where Mars is said to be in fall. Saturn was in Leo when I was born, where Saturn is said to be in exile. But Gary showed me that Venus is within her own decan and within her own bounds. And that because I'm born at night, Venus is said to be my principal benefic. That Venus prefers, I didn't learn this from Gary, but later in sect traditions, probably first from Chris Brennan, certainly from Demetra George's ancient astrology texts, that Venus is said to prefer to be an evening star because she is of the night sect. That's not what's happening when I was born, but that also Venus prefers to be in a nocturnal, meaning a water or an earth sign. So there's all these other sides to essential dignity besides rulerships. And so if you're going to do that, like, go all the way. Okay. Sheila with an interesting comment here. Just I would say Tyson's hateration of astrology because of his Saturn in Sagittarius. She wrote in the 9th house, but remember, we don't know what house because we don't know the birth time. So yeah, Saturn in Sagittarius and maybe aspects therein, but I want to go to a different place today to speak about dignity. Is it essential? Is it dignified? Is it essential? No. Like, I've done lots of great astrology readings, in my humble opinion, without any of that stuff. And, you know, when it's that example I shared before, I'm at like a meetup and somebody's really talking about how much they love Taurus Mars at the time of their birth and their birth chart. And somebody's like, no, that's a bad Mars. Like, what? Why would you shut down somebody's experience based upon what you think it should be because you learned some rules of some code? I'm in this VR collective, which seems very ironic given that mine's the school of Earth astrology. But I find it's going to be a revolutionary technology to help people learn the astronomy if I can't be outside with them in the real-time sky. And we had like soft launch of the Astro Hut, this VR community that's being created by Jean Eon in these worlds that he's creating. And the astrologers of the collective elected Mother's Day for the launch. They didn't elect Mother's Day. They elected Sunday, May 12th or whatever it was. Why? Mars was in Aries, Mercury was not in Gemini, Moon was in Cancer, Venus was in Taurus. There's all of these dignities. And I've done this, by the way, at the school a ton because I taught on Sundays a couple of years ago every month and didn't look to, you know, like the calendar holidays that would interfere with, right? But I think sometimes we can go too far in like electing moments by the rules of charts without considering the rules of, you know, people's availability and lives and whatnot. You see what I mean by that? Okay. Now I have fallen in love with the idea of dispositorship, and this is where the old terminology, not rulership, but domicile lord or domicile lady, works much better for me. And I mean, I don't love the Lord Lady thing either, right? But I've had a landlord. I've had several. Some are great. Those ones for me give space, and you never hear from them unless you need something fixed, as long as you're paying rent on time. And when you need something fixed, they come by according to a time you scheduled and don't sneak up on you or something like that, right? So why do I share that experience? Because this is really the way the dispositorship was looked at in ancient astrology. Sun and Venus are currently traveling through Gemini. Well, that's Mercury's zone. Mercury's their landlord. Maybe they have to pay him rent. If they need to figure out how something works in Gemini, and let's all face it, it's a confusing world. They need to talk to Mercury about it. And I personally love the stories that come alive in that way. I have seen it work in such a way that it helps me understand what somebody's father's mother's job was. Literally, I've seen times where it seems like a planet in a sign might be challenged because not necessarily where it is, but because it has a challenging landlord. Right? If you have like a nosy ass landlady, do you stop to consider why she's acting a fool? What is she going through? Probably not. Right? But if you do, maybe some resolution can be found in a faster way. Agreed? So that languaging for me, which is older than rulership, works so much better, not only because I have less of a bad taste in my mouth when I say domicile lord or later, I'll just say landlord or landlady. But because it actually relates to my human experience and to the experience of many. And as I said much earlier in this jam, which of course is much longer than planned, as always with me, is that the gift of gab or the curse? Anyway, that exile to me really describes a much better expression than detriment. Rhonda writes here, I am a landlord. That is how I operate. Happy tenants, happy landlord. Yeah, fascinating. And maybe happy landlord, happy tenants, right? Um, anyway, Rhonda, have you considered that astrologically? And even in your chart and where your tenants are in your chart as described by who would it be? Which house represents tenants? And so in traditional astrology, this is how we work with dispositorship. Where like I'm about to have, well, Anna's about to have a baby, our baby. I'll be there, hopefully not freaking out and supporting beautifully. I will be, not hopefully. But still, that baby will be indicated by Venus for me. Why? Because I was born with Gemini on the rise, and therefore Libra is my fifth. And Libra is said to be the place of Venus. I should say the sign of Venus. Right? So people come to me all the time pushing at their psycho boyfriend's chart. I'm just like, let's look at your boyfriend in your chart and seeing how that's being activated, partner in your chart and partnership, right? And this is one of the ways that we get after that according to the code of ancient astrology, which again really is not astronomical. That because I was Gemini rising, the planet Venus represents my children. And by the way, there's other ways to get after that, but that's weird. And then should I trip again that I have Venus in Virgo? Like what's that going to say about children, And I'm Gemini rising, so I'm represented by Mercury in my chart. And I know that might sound really foreign to modern astrology, who just says like every planet is a little piece of you. I like that as well, but traditionally you are typically identified by one planet. I have Moon in my first, and so she's strong in that regard as well. And I could go on and on there, right? But I have Venus in Virgo. Now I have Mercury in Libra, and that's going to take us to another example of dispositorship that we can actually just see in the chart today, a similar one with maybe less baggage. Let me go here. Slid off that really quickly to make sure that I didn't have any clients up in there. By the way, Astro Gold users, you can just go clear displayed data, and that is the shortcut. And all the charts you've been working on today are then gone. And so when you do recent charts here, your clients or friends' names and their birth data doesn't come up, okay? And Rhonda, since you're here, I think these should not have the data there. I think names are good enough, okay? And that would actually protect people in the case where I forget to do that. Okay, anyway. So right now, Mercury is in Taurus and Venus is in Gemini. Mars is in Aries, right? Mars is at home. That's said to be his domicile, specifically his diurnal domicile. And by the way, Mars and Chiron are completely conjunct, okay? So that little tab right there, that is where they are currently residing in the sign of Aries. And notice that you see a little Mars glyph there, okay? Because this is said to be the bounds of Mars. Notice that you see Venus here. This is said to be the face or the decan of Venus. So Astro Gold makes this as easy as well. There's this essential dignities chart. We started today actually in the hour of Mars, which is the 5th hour of a Wednesday. It's pretty much when this will be. It'd be interesting to see how that might be different in the winter. And then if so, I'll talk about that, okay? But Mars, you can see here, he gets the plus for being in the sign of his rulership in Aries. And he gets a plus for being in his own bounds or his own terms. It's said to be a place where Mars makes his own rules. The moon gets a little plus here for being in her own face or her own decan, her own 10-degree division of the zodiac, according anyway to the tradition, which says that here in Aquarius, in the last 10 degrees of Aquarius, that's said to be associated with the moon, according to the Chaldean order. And that's just a lot of language for those of you who haven't studied these parts. But why I'm showing this to you is if you're going to do this whole rulership trip, don't stop there. Look at the exaltations. Look at triplicities, where we see currently these M's describing a mutual reception between Venus and Saturn. Look at the bounds, where Mars is in his own bounds right now. And then we see a mutual reception between Mercury and Jupiter. Look at the faces or the decans, where we see Moon and Jupiter in their own decans, right? And so since Jupiter here now in Gemini is in the sign of his so-called detriment or exile, it's nice for him to be in the first bit of Gemini. Let me get this back on the screen, because that's said to be Jupiter's face, the first 10 degrees of Gemini. See that Jupiter right there. And it won't be too long before Jupiter gets to where Venus and the Sun are now, which is a little bit that's within Jupiter's bounds and Jupiter's face. And actually, I was born, as I described before, with Gemini rising, so Mercury's world, but the bounds of Jupiter were rising when I was born. The face of Jupiter was rising when I was born. And one of the ways the ancients kind of describe that is, well, Gemini is Jupiter's store, or sorry, Gemini is Mercury's store. It's like Jupiter was behind the counter or managing the place at the time of my birth. And Jupiter is going to manage Gemini very differently than Mercury would, maybe even in kind of stark opposition to how Mercury would prefer for his store to be run. I've been that employee before. Like, let's do this in this other way. Right. And so while, yes, Gemini rising describes me as a child of Mercury, there's something super Jupiterian about these divisions of Gemini that were ascending at the time of my birth. And so I really encourage y'all to look at these divisions, to look at the faces, to look at the bounds or the terms as they were called. Many of us who are studying Hellenistic astrology, like myself, prefer the so-called Egyptian terms or the Egyptian bounds. By the way, that's a very different thing than out of bounds. And for those of you in constellations or who want to join us, please do. $160 a year for like way more than you will be able to do with your time, because you're amazing and busy, but it's going to be wonderful for you to come play with folks of like heart and like mind. I will also be speaking about the out of bounds phenomena in the declination class this weekend, this Saturday at 9. Okay. So the bounds or the terms, they just describe these weird asymmetric divisions of the signs. Each sign has 5 bounds, which are said to be, use this term, ruled by visible planets, not the sun or the moon. And then there's these 10-degree divisions or faces that are all having planet associations as well. And it's cool to learn those things. Some said it like this, that when you're in your own sign, in your own domicile, just think about how it is when you're at home. You know where all the stuff is, you know the rules, right? Sometimes it's a challenge, but at least you know it's your place. You know how to do it, right? It's just easier. When you're traveling and you're far from home, it can be a challenging situation, right? And sometimes the exile trip, right? So a planet all the way in the opposite sign, like that's a stranger in a strange land. And you're just far from home and you don't have your crew around and those kinds of things, okay? However, crew was kind of described in a different way. So after, in the kind of essential dignity hierarchy, so a bunch of words I don't like in the same sentence, that idea of domicile, like being at home, maybe that's the start. Some even argue that exaltation, where planets are said to be honored guests, is even better. You're out traveling, you're received, all your meals are provided for you, like everyone's around showering love on you because you're in Pisces and you are Venus, and that is just the place where she is an honored guest. Maybe the opposite would be true when you're on the opposite side, like Venus and Virgo. However, there are divisions in Virgo. And so I keep speaking about that just because it's an example in my own nativity. And you know what? I'll just put that on the map here. So here's Venus in Virgo at the time of my birth, and she's far from the sun. And I can see because she's traveling at the same speed of the sun that she's elongated. That's even more true for Mercury when I was born. All right. And there's something about Venus in Virgo and Mercury in Libra, which is intriguing because that means they're in kind of a foreign exchange program. All right, but I want to be here now. Venus said to be in fall in Virgo and Mars in fall in Cancer. Okay. Well, oops, I keep pushing the wrong button. Maybe it's because I have Mars in Cancer. Well, when we look into these divisions, or I can just bring up like an essential dignity table, and you'll see that while Venus is in fall in Cancer, she's in her own face when I was born. And that's true also for Saturn at the time of my birth, who, while he's in a sign of his so-called detriment or exile in Leo, he's in his own face and in his own terms. Okay. And though Venus is in fall, she gets a positive score on the medieval scorecard, which I'm not really into scorecard astrology, by the way, but it's a helpful tool to get a glimpse at these things, as are things like sect. If you want to play traditional astrology, like learn the rules and then probably break them a bit too. All right. So you'll see, like, I was born with Mars in his own triplicity and his own bounds. Right. And so this is it's not negative at all. And Venus is in her own face and in a mutual reception with Mercury. Right. It's like the luminaries that maybe would be more challenged according to this code. So the point here is don't stop at rulership. And even if you're there, like, really honor these mutual receptions that we see, like at this time now between Mercury and Venus. And a nice thing here, so this is Venus in Gemini and Mercury in Taurus, is neither of those planets are said to be in fall in those signs or in any way challenged, you see. But they are in this mutual reception. They are in kind of a foreign exchange program. I think Gary was the first one who presented that to me in that regard, which, like, it makes a ton of sense, right? It's like, all right, like, California's cool, but I want to be in Mexico. And here's someone that I know that lives in Mexico. What if we just changed houses for a bit? She lived in California. Maybe she wants to hang out in the Bay for a minute. I want to get out of here in November. Maybe she wants to be a little closer. Let's do it. Right. And that idea of a foreign exchange program, like we're homies, like let me just leave a list for you. This is where you go to the farmer's market. This is where you go see the evening stars. Don't go there after 4 a.m. because of the mountain lions, whatever. You know what I mean? It's like we're taking care of one another. Like that's the idea of a mutual reception. And to use a term from Jyotisha, or what you'll know as Vedic astrology, like it was one of the yogas that did not require an aspect. So even neighboring signs, which are said to be blind to one another traditionally, or signs that are quincunx, let's say Saturn in Leo and the Sun in Capricorn. Traditionally, there's no aspect between those signs. But if there's a mutual reception like that, they can kind of connect anyway. In some of the old traditions, there's some houses or signs you don't want to connect, right? Like sometimes it's not always quote unquote beneficial. And it's interesting to see how this shows up with client work. I just want to tune into Manny, your comment here. You said you didn't get a notification this time. Bummer. So I assume that means you are subscribed to the channel here. Please do, friends. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really fuels the ship, okay? So sorry to hear that didn't happen, but I'm live here every Wednesday at 11 a.m. I call it storytelling hour. It's typically more like at least storytelling hour and a half, all right? I should say I do have to roll kind of soon. So let me just get into a few charts and I want to show you a couple interesting things. Okay. So I'll have to play with Neil deGrasse Tyson and other skeptics another time because the chart I actually want to start with you is Bruce Lee. And though I certainly have Bruce Lee in my own files, why don't we look here at AstroSeek, which is a place where you could go for free to find this chart at this URL shown on the screen in the upper left. All right. Bruce Lee, Scorpio, everything. It's not true. He was born Sagittarius, sun rising at 7:12 a.m. November 27th, 1940 in San Francisco, California. Now, why Mars? Because he's a martial, named for Mars, artist, maybe named for Venus. Look at Venus and Mars are conjoined. Venus, who's said to be in exile in Scorpio, stranger in a strange land, right? Mars said to be at home. So Moon said to be at fall in Scorpio, by the way. However, Moon and Venus, who might not know so much about how Scorpio is, they're cohabiting with Mars. Like they're right there. Maybe this is like, a powerful landlord and they'd rather not have to deal. But maybe this is the teacher of these mysterious ways that can show them how to roll. Interestingly, first of all, Bruce Lee, amazingly philosophical, right? Sag rising. Philosopher of the body, Sag rising, Jupiter in Taurus, right? Well, Jupiter in the house of illness. Jupiter with Saturn, as you can see here, and sadly, Bruce Lee died quite young, and maybe under mysterious circumstances, which could have something to do with these 12th house planets. Mercury, who represents the other for him in Gemini in the 12th, well, that might not have been Bruce's wife if you know something about the time of his death. But let me not get into gossip here. What I just wanted to show you is that Bruce Lee has strong Mars, according to the tradition anyway, where Mars is said to be in domicile, at home in Scorpio, right? Austin Coppock, I love this. He calls Mars an Aries samurai, Mars in Scorpio, ninja. And if you read into Bruce Lee, check out some of his statements about wanting to learn how to be like the water. Where are you? There. So powerful Mars in Bruce Lee's chart. Are we surprised? No. There's powerful Mars today. Koa and I got up earlier than we do, and that means it's a long drive to school. We beat traffic, right? Um, and I love it. It felt like the Aries Mars today. It's like strong Gemini, Aries Mars. I wasn't driving fast. We were just ahead. We were first, right? Actually went and got a car wash because we had time, and needed it because the thing's covered in pollen. That doesn't do well. My family's like allergy situations, right? Mars and Cancer. Maybe that's the way I do love. Get a car wash. I don't know. That seems like a stretch, right? But I was really kind of considering that today versus yesterday, where we sat in some traffic. Like, Mars was in Aries then too. What's the difference between that and now if I want to do this in a chart, right? But it just feels good to be ahead of traffic. It's better for the environment. It's better for my consciousness. Co and I get to spend more kind of easy time together outside of the car before his school starts, which is nice. So it's one of the things where it was just kind of an experience today where I was associating that in some regard with Mars, like kind of the unobstructed one, with that idea of dignity. Something I like to play with. I feel like it's also something I get played by when I worry about this isn't the right time to do a thing, even though my intuition says now. All right, well, let's get back over to here to AstroSeek, because there's another thing I wanted to show you, which is that we can here go through their database of 94,690 celebrity charts. You can choose, if you know about Rodin ratings like AA, which is from a birth record, if you want to be able to get accurate rising signs and more accurate moon placements, by the way. But in this case, what I'm doing is looking by occupation in martial artists. Okay. And this will include boxers and MMA and other folks too. Okay. And so out of these 94,500 celebrity charts at astroseek.com, there's 434 martial artists. Now, should we assume that the majority of these have Mars and Aries? Well, let's just go look, or Mars and Scorpio. Let's just do those two, okay? So I can put Mars and Aries and then search. Remember, 434 is the number of martial artist charts that are in their database at this point. So 25. So let's do 434 over 25. And that is, wait a second. Let me do 434 divided by 12. Okay, so a 12th, let me change this back to just all signs and make sure 434. Yeah, 434 was the right number. A 12th of 434 is 36 and change. So if there is even equal distribution of Mars through the signs, then there would be 36 of the 434 with Mars and Aries. There is only 25, like much less than that statistically. Let's do Mars and Scorpio. And we get 26. Let's do Mars and Detriment. Mars and Taurus. 53. A lot more than 36. Let's do Mars in Libra. 30. Still more than Mars in Aries and Mars in Scorpio. Let me go back to Mars and Taurus and show you one of my favorite examples of why essential dignity, or let's say it this way, essential debility, does not mean folks have debilitated planets. You get Chuck Norris up top. Anyone got a good Chuck Norris joke for today? But I want to show you Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay, right? Who changed his name to Muhammad Ali when he took Islam. This is the greatest boxer of all time. Now float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, in the poetry and such. Maybe we can see symbols of this here. Okay, we do have an Aries midheaven, interestingly. But the top of the chart is Taurus, the 10th whole sign with Venus in Aquarius. We have strong Aquarius, okay? The sun's in Capricorn. Let me just stop there because I would like to suggest that in modern times, when astrology has gone so sun sign, the things that we hear about Aquarius really should apply to the Aquarius sun, in the fact that Aquarius is often called strange and different and out of the box. I think those are good terms for so-called detriment, or I prefer to say exile, that you can feel the Aquarius sun very black sheep. You're literally all the way across the world from your Leo home, at least the sun is. And that's stranger in a strange land. Now, Mars in Taurus should also be described in that way. Venus in Aries. Look, Bob Marley, Venus in Aries. Do you think Bob Marley had weak Venus? First of all, he's beautiful. If I dare say so myself, and I do. He sings beautiful music. He did have a very out of the box musical subject, which is in Bob Marley in Aquarius Sun, by the way. Sang about revolution and actually led a revolution in many regards. He did have kind of an out there strange relationship thing. All right. He had 3 kids with his wife, Rita. He adopted 2 children of hers from other men, one before they were married, one during their marriage. And he had 7 children with 7 different women while they were married, also. Pretty strange, and I would say Venus in Aries, right? This is Venus, so-called exile. I don't see that as weak. I see it as different, or I prefer the term counterculture, although that can be really loaded. Let's talk about Mercury. Isaac Newton, Mercury in Sagittarius. Galileo Galilei, Mercury in Pisces. Do you think that's weak Mercury, friends? Right? If Mercury indeed indicates mind, but they were out of the box. They were breaking the mold. Galileo almost got killed for it, right? For me, I love the image of Muhammad Ali, Mars, and Taurus. And I just want to honor what Rhonda wrote here, which is what about the Gauklin placements? And that will have something to do, although Mars probably would be on the other side of the midheaven to really do full-on Gauklin here. But this is an angular planet. Look at Pluto's rising. I had a friend who's a skydiver, and I just didn't see it in her charts. Like Pluto in Libra, Mars in Cancer, but they were like this. They were like angular. And she literally had a Mars up here, like falling out of the sky. Cancer Mars falling from the top of the chart. It was like, oh yeah, okay. And then danger rising or something. It's an interesting thing to see, just like a very kind of mixed model of synastry. But Muhammad Ali has many angular planets. Pluto's rising, Mars is culminating. Moon and Mercury are setting. He had such strong Mercury, such strong Mars, such strong Pluto. And so it's important not to stop at this idea of essential or sign-based dignities alone, right? And let me open his chart over here at Astro Gold, where I can more easily see some of the other divisions. Because we might find that Mars here in Taurus is also in his bounds or in his face, and I actually already know he's not. A sneak preview of the course I'm recording with Daniel for the Turning of the Ages Mystery School. So here's Mars, 303 Taurus in the bounds of Venus in the face of Mercury. And then I'm interested in seeing, actually, I have a different time on this chart, 6:35 p.m., than what we had seen here at AstroSeek, which has, where is the time here? Oh, that's Bruce Lee. 6:35 p.m. Wow. So there's a kind of a disagreement between these two softwares since the time is the same in regards to time zone or daylight savings or something like that. I almost feel like this one makes more sense. But let me just end with this idea of planets being in signs of so-called detriment. It's not detrimental, but rather counterculture. What was Muhammad Ali's greatest fight? Look, Muhammad Ali literally known to be, like, this is where the term the GOAT came from, the greatest of all time, right? And interestingly, Capricorn sun sign for Muhammad Ali. He couldn't box for 3 years of his prime. Why? Because his great fight was choosing to not go to Vietnam, famously saying, like, Viet Cong's not my enemy. Like, I'm not going to go kill for y'all. Linda, I see you say check the Rodin rating. The Rodin rating is AA from Muhammad Ali. That's not the issue. Both of those charts had 6:35 p.m. There's a disagreement between what 6:35 p.m. looked like in Louisville, Kentucky, and that will have to do with daylight losings crime, and whether they were participating with that at the time or not. The chart that AstroSeek showed would be reflected by 5:35 p.m. at AstroGold. And I would just go to many sources to go look at that. Some of the states of the US kind of went back and forth different years and even different months of years, whether or not they were working with wartime, which is what daylight losings crime was first called. That's the issue. I think that the AstroSeek chart actually makes more sense, and I'm interested to see it because I've always worked with this other one. But regardless, let me just finish again by saying Mars in Taurus, as Muhammad Ali clearly shows. What did we see? We saw a greater percentage here in martial artists at AstroSeek. And granted, like, this is a limited data set, right? I mean, they've got only 434 of their chart examples classified as martial artists, right? But we see 53 of them have Mars in Taurus. Let me just go through really quick. Mars in Gemini, 34. Mars in Aries, 25. Mars in Cancer, 41. Mars in Leo, 3. Whoa. Oh, wait, sorry. That's Mars in Cancer and Leo. How could that happen? Sorry. So, oh, wait, that was Mars. I see. That was Mars in Cancer with Jupiter and Leo. Let's go Mars in Leo. 52. Okay, so that's just as popular as Mars in Taurus. 53. I mean, very close. Okay. Mars in Virgo, 36. Mars in Libra, as we saw before, 30. Mars in Scorpio, where Mars is said to be at home, only 26. Mars in Sagittarius, and remember, a 12th of the martial artist examples they have was 36. So Mars in Sagittarius, 41. Mars in Capricorn, 31. In Aquarius, 30. And Mars in Pisces, 35. So it's Leo and Taurus where Mars is said to be in detriment, that are in Taurus. Of those 434 martial arts charts they have, that's actually the most popular placement for Mars. Does Mars in Taurus mean weak Mars? No. And our daughter probably will have Mars in Taurus. She will if she comes at her due date. So I probably swore too much to share this with her. But it's one of the reasons why I wanted to look at this, actually. I'll be there in 1 minute, honey. Mars in Taurus as far as Muhammad Ali goes, and I would imagine many of these other boxers probably gave him a chip on his shoulder, probably actually helped him develop his strength, feeling like he didn't belong in some way or another. Like, you know, in the 60s, Muhammad Ali converts, well, Cassius Clay converts and becomes Muhammad Ali, right? Muhammad Ali says no to Vietnam, right? And we imagine that from the generations preceding. This is what I mean by counterculture. There's a rebellion in it. That's beautiful as far as I'm concerned, friends, because breaking broken rules is the right thing to do. So is essential dignity essential to astrology? No, but it really can open up powerful windows. Is it dignified? I think the way a lot of dignity usage by astrologies is actually detrimental. And I try not to be that guy. I hope that you'll look at this idea of like exile, counterculture, and see if that works for your planets that have those conditions. And just more like typecast for planets who are at home, like Mars and Aries today, and see if that works for you too. All right. See you in space, friends. Thanks for spending some time with me. I'm going to link here one last time, geminibrett.com/constellations. Will get you to the membership group where you can join for only $160 a year or only $16 a month. Cancel anytime and join me for a class this Saturday at 9 a.m. Pacific time on declination, out of bounds, antiscia, antiskia, and parallels. It's going to be dope, and we're going to do it together. That's how things work in constellations. I would love if you would give us a try. Align your stars with ours. See you in space, friends.